Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to get into something really fascinating. We're going to take a look at the psychology behind believing in conspiracy theories. You ever hear a theory and think to yourself, whoa, hold on, there's something to this.
It's amazing how these theories can just grab you, isn't it?
Yeah, and today we're going to explore why people believe in conspiracy theories. We aren't here to debunk or disprove anything, but instead...
Just to figure out that why. Why are people drawn in?
Exactly.
The psychology behind it all is a really unique window into how our brains work, especially when we're faced with the unknown.
Yeah, like you see these theories everywhere, from like major historical events all the way to like stuff we see every day online. But before we go too far, let's just take a second to define what exactly a conspiracy theory is. I mean, how is it different than just a regular theory?
Right, good question. So a conspiracy theory, it takes it a step further than just a simple hunch. It claims that a secret, and oftentimes powerful, group is responsible for something big, some big event or phenomenon. And usually these groups have bad intentions. It's like you're offering up an alternate explanation, but one that's based more on suspicion than actual evidence.
So not just a group working together, but a group that has a hidden agenda. Often, like you said, a bad one. And, I've noticed these theories really seem to take off, especially in times of crisis.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, think about the COVID-19 pandemic. All of a sudden, there were all these theories about, like, where the virus came from or even how it spreads.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It felt like everyone had a different explanation.
Like the University of Kent did some research, and they found that during these major crises, like a pandemic, people are just desperate for explanations. When the world feels chaotic, it's like grasping at straws for something that makes sense.
Yeah, like that lab leak theory you mentioned before, or even the one about 5G spreading the virus.
Exactly, classic examples.
So then maybe it's less about being irrational and more about trying to find a way to feel in control when everything seems unpredictable.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Professor Karen Douglas, she has some really interesting research on this, and it suggests that these types of theories appeal to three basic human needs.
Okay.
She calls them epistemic, existential, and social needs.
Those are some big words.
I know, right?
Can you break those down for us a little bit?
Let's start with epistemic. Basically, it comes down to our need for knowledge and certainty. Like, we crave that. Conspiracy theories often offer these super simple explanations for complex events, even if those explanations aren't actually true.
Right.
It fulfills that need to know, even if what we think we know is actually wrong.
So even if the explanation isn't perfect, it can still be comforting, just to feel like you understand.
Right, exactly. Then you have the existential need. This one is all about feeling safe and like you have control of things. When you believe in a conspiracy theory, it can sometimes feel like you're in the know, like you've got this secret knowledge that other people don't. So when the world feels like it's spinning out of control, this can make you feel a little more powerful.
Right. It's like having a backstage pass to reality. Yeah. You can see what's really going on and other people are missing it.
Exactly, and that can be kind of exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
And then last but not least is the social need. We, as humans, we want to feel good about ourselves and the groups we belong to.
Right.
And conspiracy theories can sometimes tap into that. They often frame these bad events as being the actions of some outside group. This can make our own groups look better and, again, makes us feel like we have this insider knowledge.
Just like this trifecta.
Yeah.
Knowledge, security, and belonging all wrapped up in one.
Exactly.
But I'm guessing it's not just about these general needs, right? Like certain personalities are more likely to believe in conspiracy theories?
Oh, absolutely. Research shows that people who tend to believe in these theories often share some common personality traits. Things like distrusting authority, a need to feel unique, or even a tendency toward paranoia.
So if you're naturally a bit more skeptical, or you really enjoy feeling like you have knowledge that most people don't, you might be more drawn to these alternative explanations.
Yeah, that's the general idea. And there's actually a fascinating link to a set of personality traits that psychologists call schizotypy. It's associated with things like magical thinking and unusual experiences.
Schizotypy. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So imagine you're walking down the street and you see a certain number a few times in a row. Someone with schizotypal traits might see that as like a sign or a message, while someone else might just think it's a coincidence.
Oh, okay, I see.
Psych Central has a lot of good info on that if you're interested in learning more.
Yeah, I might have to check that out. But it's interesting how, even in less extreme forms, these personality traits can really shape how we see the world.
Oh, definitely. And it's not just schizotypy. Other traits, like narcissism, which is like an inflated sense of self-importance, or even low agreeableness, which, can make someone seem critical or suspicious of others. These can also play a role.
So it's like these personality traits create a filter for how we process information. And for some people, that makes them more open to conspiracy theories. But wait, wouldn't that mean that being suspicious is always a bad thing? Because, our ancestors probably had to be pretty wary to survive,
I
right?
think that's a great point. And actually, Dr. Richard Friedman, he's a psychiatry professor, he argues that a bit of suspicion may have actually been an advantage from an evolutionary perspective. Think about our ancestors. They had to constantly be evaluating threats. Even if those threats weren't always real,
Right.
it could have saved their lives.
So being a little paranoid might have actually been helpful back then.
In a way, yeah. Being too trusting could have been dangerous. But in today's world, that same tendency to see threats everywhere can sometimes lead us down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. But even more interesting than that is this. Our brains are naturally wired to find patterns even when they aren't really there. And this is called apophenia.
Apophenia.
Yeah.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's that tendency to see connections and meaning where there might not actually be any. It can help us make sense of the world, but it can also lead us astray.
Like seeing shapes in clouds.
Yeah.
Or thinking there's a pattern in random events.
Exactly.
It's like our brains are always trying to find meaning even if there isn't any.
Exactly, and that's why it's so important to be aware of this tendency,
Right.
especially when you're evaluating information.
Because that same ability to find your keys in a messy room, that could also lead you to believe that some group is secretly controlling the world. I'm starting to see how this all ties together.
It's all connected. Yeah. It really is amazing how our brains work, isn't it? We're always trying to make sense of things, finding those connections. But it's like sometimes that search for meaning, it can lead us down some pretty strange paths. Like you were saying, that same ability to recognize patterns can also make us see connections that might not be there at all.
It's like our brains have this conspiracy mode, Like it gets triggered when we feel uncertain or threatened. And once that's activated, it's like we're primed to see conspiracies everywhere we look.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's like we've got this ancient part of our brain that's always looking out for danger, even when the danger isn't really a physical threat anymore.
Right. It's like our brains haven't quite caught up to how complex modern life is. We're built to deal with these immediate physical threats, but now it's all these abstract, complicated problems. No wonder we sometimes try to find simpler explanations, even if it means imagining like secret societies and hidden agendas.
Exactly. And the thing is, these conspiracy theories, they can be really seductive. They promise this sense of order and control when the world feels chaotic and unpredictable. But that simplification, it comes at a cost.
Because by focusing on a single, all-powerful enemy, we might be missing the bigger picture, right? We overlook all the other factors, the more complicated stuff that's actually contributing to the problem.
Exactly. Conspiracy theories, they can create a sort of tunnel vision. You get so fixated on this one narrative that you start ignoring anything that contradicts it.
So we end up chasing shadows instead of dealing with the real issues.
Yeah, in a way. And that can have some serious consequences, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole.
Because if you really believe that one group is behind all the problems in the world, well, it's easy to fall into prejudice and discrimination.
Unfortunately, that's often what happens. Conspiracy theories can create this environment of fear and distrust, and that leads to people turning against each other based on these beliefs that have no basis in reality. It makes it really hard to have productive conversations and find common ground.
So what can we do about it? It's clear that believing in conspiracy theories, it's not just a harmless hobby. It can have real-world consequences. But how do we address these beliefs without, resorting to censorship or just dismissing the people who hold them?
That's the million-dollar question. I wish there was a simple answer. But I think education is a good place to start. We need to help people understand the psychological factors that make them more likely to buy into these beliefs.
Like those deep-seated needs for certainty and control that we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. Once we're aware of those needs and how they can affect our thinking, then we can start to be more critical of the information we're taking in.
So it's about developing those critical thinking skills. Learning to evaluate evidence. Be skeptical of sources. Consider other points of view.
Absolutely. And just as important, we need to create spaces where people can actually talk about these beliefs without feeling judged or ridiculed. If you try to shame people or silence them, it often just pushes them further into those echo chambers where their beliefs just get reinforced.
That makes sense. It's about having honest and open conversations and helping people to recognize those cognitive biases that we all have.
Exactly. It's not about us versus them. It's about working together to create a society that's more informed and more resilient.
So it's about encouraging critical thinking, empathy, and open dialogue. Those sound like some pretty essential skills, not just for navigating the world of conspiracy theories, but for life in general. But I have to ask, is there anything positive about this tendency to look for patterns and explanations, even if it sometimes leads us down the wrong path?
That's a great question. And honestly, yeah, there is. Think about it. That same drive to find patterns, that's what drives scientific discovery, artistic creativity. It's even part of how we connect with other people on an emotional level. It's part of what makes us human. The key is to harness that natural curiosity and use it in a way that's meaningful and accurate.
So maybe it's not about getting rid of suspicion entirely,
Yeah,
but learning to direct it in a healthier way, a more productive way.
exactly. It's about finding the right balance between a healthy skepticism and an open mind.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about the why behind conspiracy thinking. What about the how? Are there any specific things people can do to avoid falling into these traps?
Absolutely, there are. And we can dive into those practical tips right now. Absolutely. There are tons of practical tips, and we can dive right in.
Okay, great.
So remember before the break, we were talking about how education and open dialogue are super important for combating misinformation. But you know what?
Right.
Education, it doesn't just stop when you finish school.
Okay.
It's really about having a mindset of curiosity, being skeptical, and willing to learn from all kinds of sources.
Being open to new information,
Exactly.
not just sticking with what you already know.
It's about being a critical consumer of information wherever you find it.
Okay, so
Whether you're reading a news article, watching a video online, or scrolling through social media, you got to ask yourself a few key questions.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what? Who created this? What's their agenda? What kind of evidence are they using? Are there other perspectives I should be thinking about?
So it's almost like being an information detective, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're gathering all the evidence, looking for clues, trying to piece together the truth. But how do we know if the clues are even legit?
That's where fact-checking comes in.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can find with a quick Google search. Or you can use those reputable fact-checking websites.
Right.
They're out there. And, we all have our biases, so you have to be aware of how your own preconceived notions might be influencing how you're understanding the information.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely guilty of that. It's easy to get sucked into a theory that supports what you already believe, even if the evidence is kind of flimsy.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that saying, when you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Oh, that's perfect. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's what we call confirmation bias, and it's one of the most common cognitive biases we all deal with.
Interesting.
We tend to look for information that backs up what we already believe, and then we just dismiss anything that challenges it.
Okay, so how do we get past that? It sounds like a pretty strong instinct.
It is, but we can fight it. One thing you can do is try to actively seek out different perspectives, even if they make you a little uncomfortable.
Okay.
Even maybe especially if they make you a little uncomfortable. Like try reading articles from different news sources or following people on social media who have different views than you. You can even try having respectful conversations with people who challenge your views.
So stepping outside of that echo chamber.
Exactly, and exposing yourself to new ways of thinking. I like to think of it as like cross-training for your brain.
Oh, I like that.
You're working those critical thinking muscles by giving them new ideas and new perspectives.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. And another really important skill is paying attention to how you're feeling emotionally.
Okay.
Because conspiracy theories, they often try to exploit our fears and anxieties. So if you find yourself feeling super angry or scared or outraged by something you see, take a second. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, is this information actually reliable, or is it just playing on my emotions?
That's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in the heat of the moment, especially when a theory triggers something you're already worried about.
Right.
We got to remember to pause and think rationally before we react or share something that might not be true.
Absolutely. And that's where having a healthy sense of skepticism really comes in handy.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you have to be cynical or dismissive of everything. It just means you approach information with a questioning mind. You consider all the angles.
So it's not just about, is this true or false?
Right.
It's more about what evidence supports this, what are some other explanations, and who's pushing this narrative and why.
Exactly. You got it. And remember, it's totally okay to change your mind. We all make mistakes, and we're constantly learning and growing. Being open to new information and changing what you believe when there's good evidence, that's a good thing. It's a sign of growth, not weakness.
That's such an important point. It's not about always being right. It's about being willing to learn and staying curious.
Absolutely.
Always be a student.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into the world of conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Good idea.
We explored what makes people believe in them, the potential consequences of those beliefs, and some real strategies for navigating the information landscape.
It's been a fascinating conversation. We've learned so much about how easily we can be misled and how important it is to stay informed and be careful about what we believe.
It really has. And remember, the best protection against misinformation is a well-informed and critical mind.
And that's the truth. Until next time, everyone, stay curious and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.